So, hi, can you hear me? So good evening, good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining us today for our special event, Journey with Hibakusha, the role of survivors in banning nuclear weapons. My name is Akira Kawasaki, an executive committee member of Peace Boat and International Steering Group member of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN. I'm talking from Tokyo, Japan, and I'll be facilitating today's event. This event focuses on Peace Boat activities for nuclear weapons abolition together with the Hibakusha. The Hibakusha are the survivors who lived through the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki 75 years ago. They have dedicated their lives to making sure that they will be the last to suffer such an experience. Since 2008, Peace Boat has invited such Hibakusha to travel abroad, sharing their testimonies of the reality of nuclear weapons and their appeal for their abolition. Today, you will learn more about how people around the world have partnered together to share the testimonies of survivors and how this has contributed to the adoption of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in 2017 in advancing global nuclear disarmament. Before we begin the event, let me explain a little bit more about Peace Boat and the situations we are in now. Peace Boat, an ICAN partner, usually sails around the world, empowering participants and building people-to-people connections beyond borders. Throughout 37-year history, over 80,000 people have joined our voyages. This includes the total of 180 Hibakusha and also youth from conflict regions and from the front lines of the climate crisis. Aid goods have been personally delivered to 800 vulnerable communities, benefiting hundreds of thousands of global citizens. Countless connections have been created and incredible peace initiative bonds. Yet now, as so many other people and organizations around the world are, Peace Boat is facing an unprecedented challenge. As an NGO, which depends on the income from voyages for all of our campaigns and projects, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has been far too great. 6 global voyages have had to be canceled so far. And so, we are now turning to our friends around the world for support, whether through helping to spread the word with your network, joining events such as of this one, or, of course, donating. Donations can be made either through the crowdfunding site GoFundMe or through Facebook. All funds are tax deductible for US taxpayers. As of today, we have now passed 2/3 of our target. And thank you for all your support so far. And we will continue this campaign until it is achieved. We deeply appreciate any support. Okay, so can I have the slide for the program? Okay, thank you very much. So let me quickly introduce Peace Boat Hibakusha project, or sometimes it is called Orizu project. Orizu stands for, is a Japanese word meaning paper crane, which is the symbol for peace and nuclear abolition. And maybe I think the slide can be bigger. I can, okay, so that's easier. So since 2008, we've invited nearly 180 Hibakusha to travel around the world, both from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, together with young participants. Next, please. We are sharing the first-hand story of the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and each port of call, the port of visit of Peace Boat, local group like schools, city offices, or sometimes ministers' offices kindly organize such a session, and we are talking to hundreds of people each time. Next, please. And hundreds of thousands of people, Japanese people, survived of the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. But the survivors are not only Japanese people. For example, in this photo, a Korean survivor, Mr. Kwak Ki-hoon, is talking to Chinese students in speaking of his experience and sharing the fact this nuclear weapons danger is the matter of global concern. Next, please. And also, the sufferers of nuclear weapons are not limited to those Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivors. And the Peace Boat, when we used our ship to travel, we are always connecting to the survivors and victims of nuclear testing around the world. As you may be aware, over 2,000 times of nuclear tests have been conducted around the world, and many in the Pacific Ocean, or in Central Asia, or in Sahara Desert, and many other places. So this photo is from Tahiti. And the survivors of the French nuclear tests in Tahiti have been speaking up for their rights and information and recognition. And next slide is from Australia, where Aboriginal people have been affected by nuclear tests conducted jointly by the Australian and the UK governments, and also uranium mining, which become the source of nuclear weapons and also nuclear power fuels. Next slide, please. Speaking of this nuclear power issue, we nearly almost 10 years ago experienced in Fukushima the nuclear power plant disaster. And together with Hiroshima and Nagasaki survivors, the sufferers of Fukushima have also joined our voyage to testify their experience. Next slide, please. And in each occasion, we are trying to influence the policymakers. For example, when the ship is in New York, we are visiting the United Nations headquarters for international meeting, like the review conference of Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT, or UN General Assembly sessions. So this is a kind of overview of this project of Peace Boat. So now let me introduce our guests today. Kathleen Sullivan and Ari Biza, please join. Kathleen Sullivan is my close friend and colleague, and who is a New York-based disarmament educator running the Hibakusha Stories project. And I have to confess that many of the ideas and plans of Peace Boat's various educational programs for peace and disarmament have come from my conversations and consultations with Kathleen, sometime over a drink. And Ari Biza, digital storyteller and creator of the book and documentary called The Nuclear Family, is also a grandson of Jacob Biza, a radar specialist on the Enola Gay and Boxcar, and therefore the only man on both planes which dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So before asking Kathleen and Ari to share their experience on Peace Boat, let me show you about 2 minutes video that Ari made from his participation on Peace Boat 7 years ago.
I believe if people really want to do something, this is not naive. We got to do something. Otherwise, everybody is feared.
Today, we have got the opportunity to talk about that moment of explosion of atomic bombs at Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
広島と長崎の被爆体験は人類全体への教訓であり、日本は世界にこれを伝えていく責任があります。
Hibakusha's testimonies must be understood not as just stories, but as real experiences that can motivate us to resolve the issues we face today. Our generation has the responsibility to receive the baton Hibakusha are trying to pass on and transmit their hope and determination for a nuclear-free world.
All right, thank you very much, Ari, for making this wonderful video. So, Kathleen, please share with us your experience and thoughts on Peace Boat.
Well, thank you so much, Akira, for creating this program for us to talk about Peace Boat. You say 80,000 people have been on board, but think of the effects of those 80,000 people on other people. And I would just say from our perspective in New York, where so many Hibakusha visited New York City high school students, so we can clearly say that hundreds of thousands of people have been positively affected and have had their lives changed from Peace Boat. I know my life certainly had changed when I first met you, my dear friend, in 2002, which we never would have thought that the Japanese government would have introduced us, but basically that's what happened. After the UN study on disarmament and non-proliferation education, I was brought to Japan, where I met Akira. And a year later, we were bringing a group of high school students from New York City in 2003 on a voyage starting in New York. And that in itself was an extraordinary journey. All of these young people traveling. We started in New York and we went to different countries, ending in Costa Rica. But I have to say, for me, that was the first time that I saw the effect of young people listening to Hibakusha. Amano-san was on that voyage with us. She is still with us. She is still doing well and sharing her testimony. She is a survivor from Hiroshima, an absolute firecracker of a person, full of energy and empathy and compassion. And I witnessed really at that time how Hibakusha testimony affects young people. I had worked with Setsuko Thurlow in 2000 through the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, when we had a truth commission at the UN during the UN Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference. But that was with adults, it was with activists, and of course that was very effective. But it was when I saw Amano-san reaching out to these young people that a light bulb really switched on in my head. And in 2005, Akira, you and I would collaborate on another amazing project where we brought 7 students from 7 nuclear weapon countries on the first Peace and Green Boat voyage, which was just extraordinary. And students from nuclear armed states traveled to China, to Korea. We were in Nagasaki. We ended in Nagasaki, where each student was paired with one Hibakusha, and they could hear their testimony. And we encouraged them to take that on as their own. There's so many memories from that trip. And I wonder where those beautiful young people are today. I get kind of emotional just thinking about it. But for me personally, in 2008 was when our real collaboration began in earnest. This is when, Akira, you made the amazing, you had the vision for a trip of Hibakusha, 102, traveling all over the world. And during that time, my colleague Robert Kronquist and I were invited to bring Hibakusha to New York. And this is when we started the Hibakusha Stories Project. And I have to say that was 2008. Since that time, we've had 45,000 young people hear Hibakusha testimony. That was our collaboration. That is something that, again, has affected hundreds of thousands of people. And through that work, we have been bringing students, and I have to share one story from that collaboration, although there are hundreds. I spoke with Setsuko just 2 days ago, and she shared with me that she was invited to speak at Emory College, and she spoke to this young woman. And of course, we're doing everything virtually now, but she spoke to this young woman and she said, you know, you have heard my testimony. Where did you hear it? She heard it at the UN in a collaboration with Peace Boat and Hibakusha Stories. She is a Chinese American woman. And I distinctly remember her coming up to Setsuko after the testimony and sharing with her that she had grown up as a Chinese American to really hate Japanese people. And it was through this one session at the UN in collaboration between Hibakusha Stories and Peace Boat that she changed her mind. She changed her mind from a childhood of influence. And I'm not saying that that sort of hot kind of feeling isn't passed down, and we all don't learn that in different ways. She was crying. Setsuko spent quite a lot of time with her. And I can now report 4 years later, she is at Emory College. She was going to be a physicist, but because of her meeting with Setsuko, she decided to study international relations, and she's bringing Setsuko virtually to Emory University this fall. That is just but one of a few of hundreds of stories that I personally could tell, but to think about the literally hundreds of thousands of people that have been brought Hibakusha testimony through Peace Boat, I really hope that everybody who is tuning in today will support Peace Boat so that we can continue to do this work into the future. And I just feel so honored to have partnered with Peace Boat for so many years, over so many voyages. And it is just a blessing and an honor to be here with you all today.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you so for the like a wonderful memories and words, and thank you for introducing the story of the Setsuko with the Chinese scholar. And actually, Peace Boat as an organization founded by and led by the Japanese young people, promoting understanding and real reconciliation among Asian nations, Japan, China, Japan, Korea, have been a very central element of all initiatives. And the reason why we are calling for nuclear weapons abolition is from the understanding that this threat is for all humanity, not the particular country. So thank you very much, Kathleen. So can we have Ari now? Hi. Thank you, Ari.
Hey there.
So hi, what did you discover when you joined Peace Boat? Tell us.
Wow, when I joined Peace Boat, well, I'm first of all very grateful for joining this conversation and for being invited to speak with you all. And so thank you for having this event. My journey to Peace Boat is a long and complicated one, but because my journey to Japan has been long and complicated, but I think I'd like to say that I first heard about Peace Boat through Sumiko and Mary via Yuji Sasaki, who is Sadako's nephew. And me and him were connected via the Asahi Shimbun, who connected Sumiko and I. And Mary and Sumiko helped me to communicate with Yuji. And Yuji had this idea to bring the grandson of President Truman, Clifton Daniel, and myself back to Japan to meet survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki firsthand, to hear their experiences. And on that trip, I was able to meet Kathleen, and who helped convince Clifton to become a part of the nuclear disarmament movement. And so because of that work and because of those connections and because of our happenstance encounter and connecting, she immediately believed that I had to be involved with Peace Boat. She knew what I was about, and she knew what Peace Boat was about, and just connected that to make it happen. And on the 80th voyage, the 30th year anniversary, it was a special voyage. It was a lot of, I remember being a shorter voyage because it was a summertime. There was a lot of young people. It was an anniversary year. We wanted it to be a really big thing. And I thought, how great to be able to engage with so many young people about this story. And I think, you know, in someone who very much feels that when you forget history, it repeats, and we're literally living the repetition of history, how incredible would it be to, as a young person, try to convince other young people to care about something that they might not necessarily realize is important. And when I was able to join this voyage as a web reporter for the Orizudu project, which I was graciously invited by Kawasaki-san, that I did not know how to make video. I could take photographs, I could write, but I did not know how to make a video. And I was on Peace Boat, 20 days at sea at times, and there was weeks. There was like a week, I think, between from India to Cyprus, and I had iMovie and time, much like we're now. As I often joke that it was like the original quarantine, because we have nowhere to go but the boat, and you become very close. It becomes like a floating village. It is incredible. And in this time of frustration, of inability to make a video, and technology and time, I taught myself how to make an edit. I taught myself iMovie, and I said, there's beautiful things here. I must make something more than a photograph. I showed it to the group of survivors, and one of the people in it who survived Nagasaki was a very tough guy, admittedly. And he said, I don't get it. What is the point of this video? And I thought about it, and first of all, I was so upset because, like, oh my gosh, like, I've just offended these people who I've tried so hard to win over and to gain trust of, and so I could work with them. And then here's this one person who's like, I don't like this, and I took it personally. And when the lesson I learned, Kathleen pulled me aside and was like, as emphatically and amazing and as Kathleen is, she goes, this man, when he was 5 years old, witnessed one of the most horrific things to ever happen to him in human history. He carries that with him everywhere he goes, and he's made it his mission to rid the world of these weapons that have traumatized him, that have caused so much horror in his life. This isn't about you. This is about the greater issue. And so I think, when we're all doing this work, and when we all love the world, and when we want to change things, it's really hard, and it doesn't happen overnight. And I think one of the greatest lessons is that it's never really about you. It's always about the mission, and to put yourself aside and to really focus on the work. I think that's the greatest thing about Peace Boat, is that everybody works so hard behind the scenes to make this a reality. I don't think the voyagers, I think that the passengers don't know how hard the staff works, because they do their job so well. Because because this is how Peace Boat functions. The people who volunteer, the people who run the crew, the Japan Grace staff, are the people who make Peace Boat work. And without those people, without your support, without being able to keep those people working, Peace Boat we don't know what could happen to Peace Boat. And so we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we can still communicate, we can still gather. And what's so great about this international community is that we are all so connected, and that we are all so, we work together to achieve this thing. And I think that's what was I mean, we can talk about nuclear weapons later, but I think that's really what changed the movement. It was that this international coalition of organizations that got together, including Peace Boat, was people to people, it was people to government, it was these incredible events that Peace Boat organizes that you can go on Peace Boat, you can take a tour, you can go have the great day in Vietnam, in Da Nang, or you could meet survivors of the victims of Agent Orange and really learn about what happens when it's not just a nuclear war, but how horrific war can be. And so we can have communication there. And, you know, it wasn't just, it was so many. Peaceboat offers such an opportunity that is unheard of in this world, that doesn't happen. And it was just so, it was an honor to be a part of this voyage. And then also to come back in 2016 as a student. I came for the Global University also through the support of Hibakusha Stories and Kathleen. And because, you know, and I don't think, like, people don't say this enough, Kathleen Sullivan is like the major connector of this movement, who is who's like a fixer behind the scenes, just constantly making things happen. And, you know, all of the coverage that we saw this year, not all the coverage, a ton of the coverage, Kathleen was behind. And so, you know, this voyage, me appearing here, Kathleen is behind. And so, you know, I think that we're so grateful for educators like Kathleen Sullivan, who know how to communicate something so horrific, so that could turn people off really quickly. And yet she's found a way to engage hundreds of thousands of people. And that's such a gift. And I've been so grateful to learn from her, from you, from all this Hibakusha. The last thing I can say is that one of the articles I thought to write this year, earlier in February, was the lessons that I learned while drinking with atomic bomb survivors. I mean, that because in Japanese culture, I think if we're not familiar, that drinking is very much a part of business life, and business meetings extend to the bar where people really let loose and get to know one another, and it's trust building. And I know that we did great sessions and we had some life-changing experiences in ports of call, but I think the best and the hardest work that we were able to achieve was hanging out, getting to know each other as people. And you know, everybody is individual with their own perspectives, their own experiences. They're not just survivors. And I was so grateful that they accepted me as their grandson. I mean, they're my family, and we still communicate from time to time. And, you know, me and Miyata-san did not speak English or Japanese, but we communicated. Like, we understood each other. We were best of friends. And he was the person who was like, kind of like, what are you doing? Became the closest person in the whole group. So
yeah, thank you, Ari.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for sharing the story, and thank you very much for talking about this drinking with Hibakusha. You know, in the 3 months long voyage, I have to say that everything was easy to communicate, because, you know, Ari Biza from the US have a quite different background from those elderly Hibakusha, 70s, 80s, very, you know, elder, and complete opposite, quite different background. But in the kind of peaceful village, floating village, we sometimes feel some tension, misunderstanding, but eat, talk, a drink, and some fight sometimes. But, you know, gradually we make friendship and so on. It's a exciting process. So now here, nice photo from the voyage. So I think now I'll show you the video of Ms. Sasamori Shigeko, who was on the video that you just saw. The Shigeko experienced the bombing of the age of 13 in Hiroshima, and the years after traveled to the US in 1955 as a part of the group of young women known as the Hiroshima Maidens. She has been speaking to the people in the US, Japan, around the world, including many students, to share the story of her life through Hibakusha Stories, Peaceboat, and many other initiatives. Can we see the video of Shigeko? Oh, good. Around the world.
I love young people because those people have a good future and energy and brain. So I asked them, please, when I'm going to tell you what happened to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and also most important things is think what the most important things that is life, and of course people die natural way, but natural cause we cannot help, but war is not natural, people makes it, so people can avoid it. And then also more people unnecessary life we lost is a war. Therefore, we have to stop war and never war, any kind of war, not the atomic bomb war. But once war started, they maybe use atomic bomb again. They never happen again. We should do mistake, do again. So I ask the young people, please help and think, not your life only, think people's life too.
So can you tell us your experience of Peace Boat?
I think I was so honored to go on a Peace Boat because I always thought the people should know of the peace things, not Japan, not only America, all over the world. The people should know war is a bad thing, and especially many people in the world didn't know how people suffer an atomic bomb. And once the war started, the atomic bomb can be used. So peaceful is such a wonderful mission to the survivors, atomic bomb survivors put on a peaceful. Over the years, not just only once, many years, different survivors go on the boat. They go to the many different countries to talk about it. And that is a wonderful mission. I was so happy and also enjoy the nice people to meet the Peace Boat.
Do you have any specific country that you remember very well in your Peace Boat journey?
The Vietnam, I met the children and survivors for their mothers damaged by the poison leaves. When I met them, I felt, reminded me all the people, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, those people suffered it and dies again, and really into my heart. See, not the Hiroshima, Nagasaki people only, war survivors, victims. And many world people have war victims. And I learned it. Then also, these things never happen again.
Do you think we can achieve a world without nuclear weapons and a world without war?
People, everybody's responsibility to work hard against the government, not just people who are peacemaker. That's not enough. Everybody should. And also, I think own country, Japanese people are Japanese government, and American people, American, countries, their responsibility. So people have to gather.
Thank you so much. After this powerful message from Shigeko, I think Catherine and Nari may have something to say, but I'll ask you to speak at the very end of this event. So let me move the agenda forward. The second part of this today's event. Hi, Celine. We'll have Celine and Mayu as a guest for the second part. Celine Naori is the ICAN staff member who is leading the advocacy efforts to bring the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons into force. Before joining ICAN as a staff member, Celine, who is based in Geneva, Switzerland, is formerly a Peace Boat staff who I very closely worked with during the time she was living in Japan and India. And Seto Mayu, who is from Hiroshima and joined Peace Boat as a youth communicator for a world without nuclear weapons in 2013, is now very active, not only as a singer, but also in nuclear disarmament campaigns with local youth group called Kakuwaka Hiroshima. So with Celine and Mayu, I want to discuss more about nuclear disarmament efforts of today. But before asking them to speak, let me show you some slides. So 3 years ago, a very landmark treaty, important treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons was adopted, but it was after about a decade-long process since the time of the International Red Cross Committee issued a statement of the inhumanity of nuclear weapons in 2010. After that, a series of international conferences was held in regards to the humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons. And this photo is from the second such conference that took place in Mexico, where Hibakusha were highlighted, and Setsuko Thurlow gave a very strong speech. And next slide is as a part of Peace Boat project in the advocacy efforts in pushing the governments to start the negotiation of the treaty. And this photo was taken in 2016 in the Netherlands, where the Hiroshima survivor, Mr. Morikawa, is pushing then Foreign Minister of the Netherlands to support and join the negotiation. And next slide. And finally, in March 2017, the negotiating conference was started in the United Nations. At the very opening, Mr. Fujimori, the representative of Nihon Hidankyo as a Japanese Confederation of Hibakusha, presented great remarks, and the Peace Boat provided support in that. Next slide. This is the day of the adoption, July 7th, 2017, of the treaty, and the 122 nations voted in support, and we made such a big victory. Next slide, please. And back in Japan, 3 months after the adoption of the treaty, it was announced that that year's Nobel Peace Prize was going to be awarded to ICAN. And this photo was taken in the Peace Boat office in Tokyo. There are just a few of hundreds of Hibakusha that celebrated the historic moment. And in the front row are the Peace Boat staff members in Tokyo. Next slide, please. So in December 2017, Nobel Peace Prize ceremony was held. Next slide is Ms. Setsuko Thurlow. Next slide, please. Speaking on behalf of ICAN for the prize. And next slide. The march joined by many Hibakusha who flew from Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the very cold winter time in Norway. Next slide, please. And after that, in the Peace Boat voyage, we have been really focusing on our advocacy efforts in getting governments to sign and ratify the treaty to bring the treaty into force. Next slide. And this year in August, to commemorate the 75th anniversary, very unfortunately, this pandemic has made it impossible to organize physical event. But instead we are using telecommunication tools like Instagram, Facebook, and these are the online live tour that was conducted last month from Hiroshima and Nagasaki museums. And next slide. some of our efforts in this August. One is the Hiroshima and ICAN Academy, educating new leaders for nuclear disarmament. And also here in Japan, we are inviting policymakers, the heads of political parties together to discuss when and how Japan can join the treaty. So that's it for the slide. So now I would like to invite Celine to share her thoughts on this process and the Hibakusha's role in banning nuclear weapons.
Thank you very much, Kawasaki-san, and thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to share a bit my experience in working with Peaceboat as a staff and now with ICAN as a staff too, and about the role that Hibakusha's voices have played and a crucial one, and how Peaceboat has really shaped the work of ICAN in terms of the humanitarian initiative to ban nuclear weapons that led to the adoption of the TPNW, and that is currently leading towards entry into force of this treaty. I think it's really interesting to see when I started with Peaceboat in 2008, I mean in 2007, but in 2008, when we had the first global voyage of Hibakusha around the world that came just after the creation of ICAN, and how together the two movements reinforced each other in really changing the narrative and building momentum. Up until then, nuclear weapons were really thought about in terms of tools of military doctrines or power politics. And I remember speaking with a very established peace activist in the international peace movement about the very first global voyage with Hibakusha, telling him how we're bringing hundreds of Hibakushas, and back then the first reaction was like, well, that's great, it's interesting. But this is of the past. This is, like they are the old generation. How do you get youth involved? And I was really shocked at that point, and I'd be really interested to know what this person thinks today. But I think it's been actually the opposite. I think the voices of Hibakusha and the work that Peaceboat and Hibakusha Stories have done with young people around the world has really shaped the narrative, has changed the global look at nuclear weapons and the urgent need to disarm. I think we underestimate, most people underestimate the power of hearing firsthand accounts of the horror that Hibakusha experienced, the lasting legacy of nuclear weapons, and the physical and psychological suffering Hibakusha have been through, and how much of an eye-opening experience it is, and how this experience has led the process over the last decade. Most government experts, so-called experts, in suit, in conference room, play simulation processes. When they talk about nuclear weapons, they do calculation. Yet Hibakusha are the real experts who have experienced atomic bomb in their flesh and soul. And at the advocacy level, we heard, and it was really empowering to hear from Ari and from Kathleen and how young people are impacted. I think we cannot underestimate the impact that Hibakushas have on decision makers. And I think it brings those high-level officials, whether they read, whether they hear, but especially when they meet in person, what Hibakushas have experienced and their appeal. I think it has the power of transforming it from an abstract, theoretical discussion to a real reality that they can relate to. And in that, I think the fact that today, the treaty that was adopted, the Hibakusha in the 3 international conferences that spoke have had a lasting impact on all the diplomats and government officials that were there. The survivors of tests and the atomic bombs in New York, in the negotiating room, had a lasting impact. And today it's interesting to see that in the treaty itself, their suffering is being acknowledged explicitly. That the treaty has a clause about victim assistance, which is very new in terms of the nuclear disarmament debate. And that today they're having a major role in bringing the treaty into force. Throughout the year, since the adoption of the treaty, Peace Boat organized a lot of high-level meetings with officials, either at the national government level, at the regional, legislative, or municipal level. And there are too many to recount many of them, but maybe there are just a few that we can share here. In our line of work, I think it's really exceptional to see the direct impact of what we do, resulting in a direct output. Yet I remember in July 2018, Peace Boat organized a high-level meeting between Hibakushas and a high-level official at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Panama. And just a few weeks later, and at that time, after hearing the testimonies, I remember that the officials promised Hibakushas, yes, we're gonna work on our ratification. And yet a few weeks or months later, Panama was able to deposit its ratification. More recently, we have worked for many months with Nigeria in finalizing the ratification process. And we knew that they wanted to do it, but we don't quite know why and how things got delayed. Yet in early July, when Setsuko Thurlow wrote personally to heads of states around the world and wrote a letter to the Nigerian president, we know that when he received that letter, he took his phone and called all the relevant ministries and asked them, well, where is it at? And within a few weeks, again, they were able to deposit the ratification on August 6th for the anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. And there are more examples. Even yesterday when Malta signed, as part of the narrative, they were saying that they were doing that this year, the year of the 75th anniversary. And I think a lot of governments today, because of the work that Peace Boat has done and that we're doing together with ICAN, see this year as being essential for entry into force of the TPNW.
Yeah, thank you, Celine. So now, Hibakusha and the ICAN campaigners, they were working together to push the governments to sign and ratify the treaty. So, Celine, are you optimistic for an early entry into force of the treaty?
Well, yes. I'm actually quite confident. I mean, I know as a fact that quite a number of governments are working really hard to advance the process of ratification. Today, we have 44 states party already out of the 50 we need for entry into force, meaning we only need 6 more. And we know that a lot of countries are working really hard to be among the next 6 ratification and hopefully more. Just as we speak, we know that in the Comoros Island, for example, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has brought ratification of the TPNW in front of the Council of Ministers with the hope that they could pass it through Parliament soon. We know that a lot of countries around the world see this year as an important year. Throughout the anniversary, the message of Hibakushas has been honor the victims and survivors, not with your words, but with your action. And I think a lot of governments have gotten the message that in order to honor them, they need to act by depositing the ratification and joining the treaty. So hopefully it will be within 2020.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Celine. So now I think I will show the video from the ICAN's Executive Director, Beatrice Fihn. Can we have it?
Hi, my name is Beatrice Fihn, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. And as the risk of nuclear weapons use is currently on the increase, and we see more threatful rhetoric from nuclear arms around the world, it is more important than ever that we remember the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons and the impact of these weapons have on people. We need to listen to the stories of survivors more so than ever today. And I think that that's why Peace Boat is such an important organization and such a key part of our campaign. As an organization, it travels the world and brings the survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki with them so that other people can learn and become educated about what nuclear weapons really are. And that is such an important thing to do right now when we see the nuclear arms states go in the opposite direction. And it's really been an essential part of our campaign that Peace Boat has managed to lift up the stories and not just share them in Japan, but to really bring them to the rest of the world. There are numerous of instances where Peace Boat, for example, has been traveling the world and docked with its ship in capitals and in different countries, held public events, met with decision makers, and that has immediately resulted in growing the support for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. So this is really essential work. And throughout, for example, this past month when we've been working with the 75th anniversary of the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Peace Boat brought Hiroshima, brought Nagasaki to the rest of the world through live events, through online education, through organizing live streamed exhibition tours of the museums in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And we notice from the international side what an impact this kind of work has, how people are responding and understanding nuclear weapons for what they really are through the work of Peace Boat. I'm so grateful to have worked alongside the whole organization, as it is a founding member of ICAN, it is a steering group member, and its staff and the whole organization has shaped the campaign into what it is today through its consistent focus on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons, and really helped steer and shape our strategy, our work that is based on humanitarian law, that is based on the voices and expertise of the survivors. So I'm immensely grateful for the work of Peace Boat, and I really encourage everyone to support this fantastic organization at this time where, of course, the cruise industry is struggling. To be able to bring survivor stories and peace education directly to people around the world is a remarkable thing, and it's something that's having a huge impact on the work that we do. So thank you to Peace Boat for your fantastic work, and I really hope to see people rise up and support the work that you do.
So we've heard a lot of messages from the international side of activities. So now I would like to invite Mayu to speak of her experience in Japan and in Hiroshima.
Hello. Hello, I'm Mayu Seto. I'm from Hiroshima, and I joined the Peace Boat voyage in 2013 together with Ari and Kathleen. I learned a lot from the voyage, and one thing I learned is that not only listening to survivors' testimony and spreading their messages, we have to, at the same time of listening and spreading the message, we have to find our own role to make a better world without nuclear weapon. So after coming back to Hiroshima a few years ago, I and my friend established a group called Kakuwaka Hiroshima. Kaku means nuclear and waka means young people. So we are basically young people who cares about nuclear policies of Japanese government. We simply do not understand why the Japanese government do not join the treaty, and we simply want to ask why the government cannot do that to our parliament members of Japan elected from Hiroshima. So we basically active in Hiroshima locally. So we try to make appointments to those Diet members who elected from Hiroshima and ask them, how do you think the government not joining the treaty? Or what do you think the obstacle of them not joining the treaty? So far, we met 8 of Diet members among 16 elected from Hiroshima. And we also try to spread what they're thinking, their thoughts through social media platform, including YouTube and Twitter, so that young people like us can understand what they're thinking, and maybe it can affect how they vote to in next election. So yeah, that's what we are doing.
Okay, thank you for sharing about that. So now, we are going to the very end of the event. So let us invite Kathleen and also Celine, and once again in the screen. And unfortunately, Ari had to go for the next meeting. But Mayu, thank you very much for sharing about that. But Mayu, do you think you can change Japanese government and Japanese policymakers?
I am not sure, but at least we have to do, like, when we ask them how do you think about it, the parliament members for the first time, maybe not the first time, but for the first time, maybe they can think about, oh, we have to change it. It can be a problem that our government not joining the treaty. So I think I'm not sure if we can change, but I want to change, and it has power, I believe.
But I really like your very positive attitude for that. Thank you very much. And, time is limited, but Kathleen and Celine, if you have any final remarks for 30 seconds or 1 minute, that would be great. Kathleen, maybe?
Well, I want to echo what Celine said, which is, a lot of people talk about nuclear weapons as an abstract problem, or just leave it to the politicians. One of the things that we have really worked hard to do in Hibakusha Stories, and again, shout out to my dear beloved Robert Kronquist, who I started this project with, and also shout out to my beloved Felicity Ruby, who through Reaching Critical Will, which she started in 2000, was part of bringing ICAN into being, that whole, as they like to say in Australia, mob in Australia, where ICAN first originated. We are on the shoulders of giants, and it's so important to always touch gratitude, to think about all where we come from, who affects us, how we move forward. And I love what Celine said about this not being an abstract issue. The Hibakusha know what nuclear hell is, and they allow us into their experience, and they risk their personal comfort every time they relive those painful memories. I think that's so important to understand about our beloved Hibakusha family members. And we translated this in the high schools by saying, nuclear weapons are not an abstraction. They are personal to us. So instead of thinking, as the ICAN movement and the treaty has, we've moved from abstract to personal, this from the military doctrine of deterrence to what these things do to human bodies, to the environment. So what we like to draw on is, what is it that you love? What is it that you love about being alive, as a way to motivate our activism? And I would like to say, as a closing, that one of the things I love about being alive is all of the people and the friendships that have come to me through our work for nuclear abolition, that have come to me through Peace Boat, that have come to me through individual survivors who have affected me personally in such a profound way. And I know all who have been lucky enough to come across their path. So let's keep Peace Boat strong. Let's keep moving forward to our goal for the total elimination of nuclear weapons.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Celine, any final remarks?
Time is very short, but I just would like to tell you, Mayu, that I think you should gain confidence. I think you might not change the government's position this year or next election, but governments change, and you will. And we all rely on your generation and the next to finish the job we've started. So please gain confidence that you are having an impact. And I think we've seen that in Japan and with other nuclear weapon states. If this treaty and if those voices of Hibakusha were not as threatening to them as they are, they wouldn't take so much effort to reject it. So I think we are doing the work in the right direction. And I really wish that the people tuning in to this event will support Peaceboat, because the world needs it. We need to continue with the efforts that Peaceboat has started and is spearheading with Hibakusha in Japan and around the world. And our work at ICAN and Hibakusha, and we all rely on these work. So I really hope people will support.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fihn. Mayu, did you have any response or final words from you?
I will be confident, and I will try to pass on this confidence to next generation too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
also,
much. Yes?
Mayu, you are also an artist, and you bring your work for nuclear abolition through your singing, through music, through artwork. And I think you set an example for how we can bring this message through different media. So I just wanted to say thank you for that as well.
Yeah, very important point. Now I remember it. And, the next time we invite Mayu is to a peace concert, online peace concert organized by Peaceboat, for nuclear abolition.
Great.
Okay.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Fihn, Naori, Kathleen, Sullivan, Seto, Mayu, for your participation. Thank you so much. Let me conclude this event. So that's it for today. But before we close, let me once again remind you of Peaceboat's crowdfunding campaign. We would warmly welcome any support. And I would like to introduce our final event for this campaign in August, titled Music and Art for Social Change. It will take place from 8 p.m. in New York on August 27, which is 9 a.m. the next day in Tokyo. As in the title, this event will introduce 4 talented artists from around the world who have performed aboard Peaceboat, followed also by an online benefit concert. Thank you very much for your participation today, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.